everybody, and welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. In case this is your first time here, welcome to Shop Talk. The idea is that it's Monday, it's after work, we're kicking back just a little bit, enjoying our post Monday work time, and we're enjoying it with you, dear chat. For the next hour, we're going to be together. We're going to talk about some things. We've got a few topics of discussion. I've got them right in front of me. Plus, this is a interactive show after a fashion. And so you can drop your messages in chat. If you have questions, absolutely ask away. We might even give you good answers. We'll probably give you an answer. There's like a 30% chance it'll be a good answer. There's about a 12% chance it'll be a fantastic answer, the most amazing answer. I honestly should have charged you consulting rates for it. But for the rest of it, it's probably going to be somewhere between a good answer and something that we made up on the spot, because pro tip in life, if you don't know the answer, just make stuff up, but look believable, and people will just follow and understand that, oh, yes, this guy clearly knows what he's talking about. The way he speaks indicates that he is absolutely knowledgeable in the manner in which he speaks. So go ahead and do that and see how well it works out for you. You might even get into management. All right. We have a few topics for tonight. Topic number one, the first, is to welcome our illustrious panel. So we have over in one direction, cardinal direction easterly, Mala. How you doing, Mala?
Good evening, everyone. Nice to meet everybody again.
Absolutely. And a man who does not believe in cardinal directions. A man who is only interested in the edges and corners of life. Southeast of me is Mike. How you doing, Mike?
Hi. Hello, everybody. Look, I'm going to be like Kevin someday. I got
Oh
my
dear,
own green screen.
he's got props. Oh, he's got a green screen. Now if life is getting fancy, I mean, one of these days you'll actually get the green screen to work.
Yeah, I had to order work paid for that, but I got to buy a shower curtain. I'm sure that's what it is.
The rod, the stand to hold up the green screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one of those. Had one of those for a while in the new house back here. This is just attached to a wall, so that I didn't have it taking up a fair amount of space in the room. But it works out pretty well, except with the service that we're using for uh, chatting here, because it doesn't like to play nice with OBS Studio, and thus I can't actually show my background and have it green screen enhanced. So instead, we get literally the green screen, but it's okay. It works out well. It means I can actually wear green for Shop Talk, which, in case you are deuteranopic or protonopic, I'm not wearing green today, but you may not be able to tell. All right. First real topic of the night. We had our first. Is that a fake topic? Is introducing us a fake topic? I'm not sure. Chat, let us know. Let us know your thoughts on whether introducing us is a fake topic or if it is actually a real topic and we should just start numbering at 0. But topic number one for today is SQL Saturday Raleigh. Mala has taken a month off of my life by telling me that SQL Saturday Raleigh is less than a month away. I was here thinking, oh, it's probably 2 or 3 months away. We've got plenty of time for everything. No, it is May 17th. It is coming up not even 1 month from now. So, what you can do, dear viewer, go to SQLSaturday.com, go search for Raleigh, assuming that it isn't already past May 17th. If it is past May 17th where you are, you probably are too late to sign up, unless you have a time machine, in which case come back to mid to late April and then sign up for SQL Saturday Raleigh, because SQL Saturday Raleigh is free unless you want lunch, in which case you can pay us money and then we will provide you lunch. It's just kind of how the exchange works. We use money as a means of exchanging goods and services, and so that's generally the thing that we land on, because for SQL Saturday Raleigh, we don't really believe in double coincidence of once. Just doesn't work out that well. I mean, you could bring a chicken. You could bring a chicken and try to exchange a chicken for lunch, but I'm not sure that I'm going to accept the chicken. I don't know. Maybe somebody will accept a chicken in exchange for lunch, but you're gonna have to start asking around. People like, hey, how about a chicken and a haircut? What can I get for a chicken and a haircut? And the answer is, I don't know. Probably still not lunch. But if you sell that chicken somewhere else and you get money, you can then exchange the money for lunch, and then you'll have lunch. And I guess you probably won't have a chicken anymore, unless you have multiple chickens. In which case, chickens are essentially fungible. You may give them names, but let's be honest. If you replaced out the chicken, how many people are really going to recognize, oh, that one was Cluckers, and that one was Colonel Cluckington? Probably not a lot of people. So Solomon,
Some of them are very exotic now. They all look very different. There's very different breeds.
that's fair.
My
That's fair.
neighbor's chickens are all very unique.
Now you unless you get a silky. Like if you have a silky, that one you're going to recognize it. Silkies are, by the way, in case anybody in chat doesn't know, silkies are the black chickens. They don't taste that much different from normal chicken. They are just a little bit gamier, but a lot of people keep them as pets because they are black chickens. So, dark colored feathers, dark colored skin, and slightly gamier than normal laying hens. All right. I don't know much else about chickens. I'm definitely not a chicken aficionado, except when it comes to eating the chickens. So I'm pretty much all limited on my chicken knowledge, which is part of why I'm not willing to accept chickens in exchange for a lunch ticket, because I just don't know how to. I don't know how to price that chicken appropriately on the market. So I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to say you have to use a common means of currency. And the common means of currency we have accepted is you can use Dogecoin. I will accept Dogecoin, but we will also accept US dollars. All right. To answer your question, Solomon, actually, we were talking about this pre-show. We're probably going to sign up the speakers automatically, just automatically register all of you. I will send out an email to that effect some point.
I'm automatically going to take $12.
Oh, well, no, speakers. First of all, lunch isn't $12, Mike. Don't spread disinformation. Lunch is actually more expensive than that. So speakers actually get free lunch. That's yet another reason why, if you were a speaker for SQL Saturday Raleigh, you're living high on the hog. You don't even have to bring a chicken, but you will get a free lunch. Now, as far as registration, if you are not a speaker, you already know if you're a speaker. If you don't know if you're a speaker, you're not one. But in case you are not a speaker, in case you have not yet registered, you have not yet signed up, go to, I'll drop the link already, but SQLSaturday.com, select the Raleigh link, and you can register on that page right now or whenever you're watching this video. I guess if you're watching the video in the future, right in the future, but right now in the future. So once you will have gone to the page and will have had signed up, then what we should have some done is you will have the ability to show up on May 17th. Time travel really messes with tenses. When you get that past perfect, future, subjunctive, participle, it's so weird. But in spite of that, you will be able to show up on May 17th, and we will not have to bounce you. I don't want to have to bounce anybody, so please sign up SQLSaturday.com. If you say, look, I don't have a chicken, I can't give haircuts, I have no idea how to get these pieces of currency that you need for lunch, I don't even want lunch, I have my own chicken, I'm just going to bring my own chicken with me, then that's fine. You do not, in fact, have to pay for lunch. There is a free ticket where you can come in for free with no lunch and spend the entire day with us, learning all about SQL Server, learning all about a variety of different topics. It's going to be a hoot. Not a chicken joke. That's actually an owl joke, if anything. But it will be a lot of fun. I guarantee it, or somebody else's money back. But specifically somebody who got one of the free tickets, not one of the people who paid for the tickets. So basically, come in and enjoy yourself, but I guess leave the chickens at the door. Unless you're going to eat it during the day, in which case, if you're really good at cooking it, then let me know. Otherwise, probably just leave it at the door. I don't know if chickens are allowed in because you have to actually sign in with security. And chickens are illiterate. They are incapable of writing. They can't sign their own name. They can't even hold the pen. You can stick the pen in the chicken's feathers and it'll just fall right out. So that's why chickens aren't allowed in. Okay. That was the first topic. I milked that one as far as I could. Also not a joke. We weren't talking about cows. If you do bring a cow to SQL Saturday Raleigh, I may just let you in just on principle alone. But otherwise, please don't do that. Leave all the livestock at home. Livestock at home, making money for you so that you can buy the lunch ticket with money. That's probably going to be your best bet. There are a few other paths to get there, but honestly, this is the meta. Just use your capacity to build goods and services and then exchange that for money, and then you'll get the ticket for lunch. All right. Now, I have definitely run that one as deep into the ground as I possibly can. But unfortunately, I'm not even done with the topic yet. We still have to talk about the Brent Ozar Precon that is happening on Friday, the 16th of May. So the day before, Brent Ozar is coming. That one, there is no free version. This is you must pay for it. It is $199 per ticket. But what that will get you is a full day of Brent talking about how to make your cloud databases faster, focusing on Azure, AWS, and Google. Incidentally, a lot of this, I imagine, is going to play very well if you have on-premises SQL Server instances as well, because although some of the topics will be around cloud storage options, et cetera, many of the things will still apply on-prem. Mike is going. I will go. There will be many people. There's already quite a few people who have signed up. So if you have not yet signed up, I recommend it. No chickens in exchange for that visit. So, this one's $200. You probably can't bring $200 worth of chickens. It's just not going to work out. That is a lot of chickens to put in your car. And we just don't have the space to hold all of those chickens. So even if we could accept them in exchange for a ticket, it won't work. It's not going to work. Even if I could then take the chickens and make the lunch on the next day with them, we're just not equipped to handle that. Unless Doug Purnell brings his smoker, in which case I may take a set of chickens from somebody. But that was a joke. Please just pay with money. All right. Now that I am done exhorting people to exchange their money for goods and services of our own, specifically goods and services around the full 8-hour day of Brent talking about making stuff faster, followed by a full day of many people talking about many topics in many different fashions. There's a lot going on May 16th and 17th. So we highly encourage you to sign up and come on down. That's all I've got for that topic. But before I switch to the next topic, I will allow Mike and Mala to say something, because honestly, I think I've been speaking for about 10 minutes straight and haven't had the opportunity to breathe, except for that one dramatic breath. So what do we got?
Well, I know we're talking about SQL Saturday. I hope everybody comes. You can see my palatial office as it is, with the nice Chinese drywall and everything. It's great.
That's true.
But it is a nice facility for an event, so we'll have a good time.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good place to be. Very centrally located, and there will be a SQL clinic. You want to talk a little bit about that, Mala?
Yeah, sure. So SQL Clinic is something unique to our event from what I have seen, and I've been to a fair number of events, so I can say that. It's where you can get free advice on some of the problems you have, and talk to some people who are really good at what they do. Um, we were wondering whether we could have it this year or not, because the number of rooms we have is limited and we have sessions going and everything. But because we have fewer sponsors, looks like Kevin's made a decision that we can have it, so we are going to have it. Uh, I'm not sure who are the people who are going to be sitting there in full detail, so I'm not going to mention anybody's names. It's going to be good. Um, and what else? If people are holding back on paying for lunch, I recommend that you do it, because you take advantage of the time you have there to talk to other attendees, to speakers, to everybody and make the most of it. And the lunch fee may seem a bit steep, but it's worth it. So go for it is what I would say. What else? We are really looking forward to it because it's been a very long time since we had an event in town.
That is true.
That's
It's
my
been
spiel.
6 years
Yeah,
at this point. Um,
yeah.
and as far as lunch goes, I would note it is basically the same price as if you were almost the same price as if you were going out to whatever fast food place nearby. So we will have 60 minutes for lunch, 1 hour for lunch. So if you are just dead set, I'm not going to stay for lunch. I'm going to go grab my own thing. There will be probably just enough time for that, but we won't have a long 90-minute lunch or anything. So keep
Hmm.
keep that in mind if you want.
I would also add, as someone who works here, there are not many options around here.
Yeah, not very close. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to go down Alexander to that Sheets, and then there's a couple places there, um, and then in the other direction, there's like one. There's like it's a Southern thing, and you can get subs at Publix, but that's as far. It's kind of far to go down to Miami Boulevard, and yeah, so it's just not super convenient to a lot of places.
Right. Also, none of those places accept chickens either. So,
No, chicken feed they do. Chicken feed they do. Yeah.
all right. We have a real topic that does. Yeah, I have read it, so it doesn't involve chickens. Um, I had to double check in my mind and see if it did, in fact, involve chickens in any way, but it turns out no. Azure Machine Learning. Uh, if you use Azure Machine Learning, you may have received an email not too long ago that, hey, Azure ML is getting rid of their software development kit, the version 1 of the SDK. You should upgrade to the S2, V2 SDK, excuse me. And so I'm going to have a video that will come out a week from tomorrow on the 29th that goes into this in some great detail. But as Shop Talk viewers, you get a sneak peek of what I'm going to say, except that what I'm going to say next week will actually be rehearsed and recorded and scripted and will probably be coherent. Whereas what you get here is here and now. So you get the Gonzo version of it right now. As a real quick note, the the SDK V1 has been around, oh boy, for probably about a decade. The V2 of this software development kit has been around since 2021, I believe, which means V2 has been around for quite some time. They have supported V1 for years after V2 came out. It kind of makes sense that they're just saying, okay, we're going to get rid of the first version. And also, there is the Azure CLI, AZCLI extension for Azure Machine Learning. There was a V1 of this. There is a V2 of it as well. V1 of the CLI extension is going away this September. You have until the end of September. It's gone after that. You will need to switch over to V2. By contrast, if you are using the V1 SDK, the Python software development kit, that will have official support until September 30th of 2026, at which point it's gone. So you'll have just over a year to get all of that sorted out. And this article, let me drop a link to that in chat in case you are in a world in which you are currently using Azure ML V1 SDK. There are some instructions on how to switch to V2. I will note that most of the assets are consistent between the two, which means if you trained a model using V1 code, you can still use it with V2. Models are still workable, data sets are still workable, most data stores are still good as long as it's a file-based data store. If you have a SQL-based data store, Azure SQL Database or Postgres or a SQL Server instance, those things are not supported in the V2 SDK. The V2 SDK is very much file-centric, and as a result, you're not going to be able to use those anymore. The recommendation that I have, that I will share in the video next week as well, is essentially, if you have a data store that is SQL based, turn that into some function or service that writes out files, read those files. You will be much happier in life. It is a little bit of extra work. You may have, oh, well, now I have a data factory job, or I have an Azure function, or a PowerShell job, or some SQL agent command that writes out files to disk and then uploads them to blob storage. Okay, that is mildly painful, but it is a lot less painful than trying to shoehorn SQL commands into Azure machine learning code. It does not work very well. I tried it, did not work. So don't try to fight that one too hard. Otherwise, so most of the assets are going to be still available V1 to V2. A lot of that stuff doesn't change. What does change is the names, the namespaces, and the concept of jobs. Jobs are a thing that they introduced in V2 that replaced experiments, runs, script pipelines, experiments, runs, and pipelines. All of those got merged into jobs, and its goal is to simplify that whole process of, here's a thing that you do with your machine learning code. So here's a thing that you can run off of your machine learning code. Incidentally, all of this stuff they talk about in the documents here. So there's a whole slew of links, as well as some advice on, hey, I have a workspace. How do I migrate that workspace? And generally, that's no big deal, except if you have a private endpoint, in which case that changed radically. Anyhow, that's probably all that I want to talk about for this article. I just wanted to bring awareness in case anybody is using Azure Machine Learning. If you are, then this is something that will affect you next year. Until then, you can keep using V1 code. What's nice about the migration is that it is not an all or nothing operation. So this is not flip a switch and now you're on V2 alone. Instead, you can stay with your V1 code. You can write new V2 code. You can start migrating V1 over. Both sets will work until September of 2025 if you are talking about the CLI, June of 2026 if you are talking about the SDK. You can have your SDK code still around. You can still test it. You can compare. You can make sure that things run the way you expect them to, and give yourself about, 14 months at this point to get that cleaned up. So plenty of time, which means 13 months from now, a bunch of people are going to send out panicked messages of, how do I convert all of this code over? And at that point, that's when I'll say, hey, I happen to know a guy who has a consulting company that does some work with Azure Machine Learning. You should give him a call. But please don't call me, because then I would have to answer a phone. Send me an email instead. All right. That was a topic on Azure ML. I suppose it's a public service announcement. I don't know how many people in chat are actively using Azure Machine Learning, but I do run into enough people who are using it, who have used it, that it's worth talking about. We have another topic. And I'm slowing down because I realized that we're running low on topics. So chat, if you have any topics of discussion, get them in. Then you can derail me and we can ride out this last 37 minutes without having to get really embarrassing in terms of vamping for material. So this question came up. Mike had a question about Apache Iceberg. The question is fairly simple. What the heck is Apache Iceberg? And that's a fair question. I happened to see this article from Maria. Sorry, Maria, I will not be able to pronounce your last name. But Zakordev? I know I've failed twice, and that I will not fail a third time. So, Maria wrote an article at MS SQL Tips, and I just dropped the link in chat. This is Apache Iceberg versus Delta Lake. So you may be familiar with Delta Lake. If you're not familiar, let me set the stage for you. You have data lakes. Data lake is, here's a file system. I've got data stored here. Now, the original data lakes were in the Hadoop distributed file system. I have a set of servers, and I'm going to store a large amount of data on those servers. It will automatically split out that data across the servers to ensure that I have a minimum number of replicas. It will ensure that the data is readily accessible and that I can have multiple replicas pushing parts of the files concurrently so that I have faster operations than if I'm just talking to a single server. Along with this data lake concept, we started forming patterns. There were a couple of file formats, ORC or optimized row columnar, or ORC as I will call it, because there is no way you're not getting me to call that ORC, and Parquet. Both of these are column store style files. They are fantastic for analytical work. They are less fantastic for row by row work or long strings of text. Now, there were other file formats that are specialized for long streams of row by row text, like Avro, but that's neither here nor there. So we have Parquet. Parquet ended up being the major winner. You do see ORC. ORC is still around in some projects. It is still the default in several Apache projects. But Parquet is the one that Databricks landed on, that Microsoft has landed on, that Snowflake has landed on. It's basically become the winner of the column style data storage for data lakes. Along with Parquet, it turns out that we need another format because Parquet is amazing for compressed data, analytical data that we have crunched together, because it turns out that within a single column, there tends not to be a huge cardinality. You tend not to have a huge number of unique values for, let's say, quantity sold, for customer ID, for store ID. We tend to have a fairly fixed number. That number usually is in the double digits, triple digits, maybe 4 digits. We may have 1 billion rows in the table, but only 100 stores or 500 stores. And so you're not going to have radical variation in that file. You're going to have a large number of records with the same store ID. As your data is more strongly distributed, if it's keyed toward, let's say you have some customers who are consistent purchasers, within a segment of your data, you may have even less variability. You may have 500,000 customers, but it turns out 400,000 have only ordered a product once, and 20 customers are the main buyers of your product. Well, in that case, you don't really have a cardinality of 500,000 over the majority of your data set. Over any particular slice of your data, let's pick 1 million rows, your cardinality might be more like 10,000. And this is good for Parquet because Parquet has mechanisms to take that data and compress it. Instead of having, let's say, customer ID 1234 55,000 times, you can shrink that down. You can compress it down to this block is 1234, and we have like a row start and a row end indicator of, okay, that's our set for 1234. Or we may turn 1234 into a single byte binary. And now you have a dictionary lookup of this byte represents customer 1234. So instead of having an integer, a 4-byte or an 8-byte integer, or even a 8-byte, 12-byte string, then we can have a single byte to represent my specific customer. And of course, you can pack a lot into a single byte. So you have various ways of compressing down this data. But what happens when we add new data? Well, we have to create new Parquet files, or we have to rebuild a Parquet file, and that building can take some time. You may have 150,000, 200,000 rows that you represent within a file. You might have millions of rows within a file, tens of millions of rows in a file if you go a little bit too far. But no matter how many rows you have in there, you're going to have to unpack them, make your modifications, and then repack them. And that can be slow. This is why we don't use Parquet for transactional processing systems. It's also why historically in data lakes, we had append-only systems. We did not edit files. We did not delete files. We did not modify data within files. We would add a new file with the records. And those records could be change records. So we might have an update record for a prior row in the data set, and then we would have to write special code to read through all of the files, figure out which ones of these changed with our change records, and then combine that all together and write it out to the end user. And then maybe every once in a while we would reconcile, we'd go back through those files, we would combine in all the records and get a final version, depending on what the need was for that particular analytical application. This is okay. It turns out that there's a more efficient way than just creating a bunch of small Parquet files, though, because small Parquet files are the death of performance in a data lake. Parquet files really should be a certain size. If you have too many tiny Parquet files, your performance will suffer accordingly. As a result, Databricks came up with Delta format. Delta format is Parquet file plus JSON representing the change set. And then the Databricks engine would take those JSON files and apply those changes to the Parquet behind the scenes for us without us having to write code explicitly to do this. And every once in a while, you would build up enough changes that it would take the JSON files and essentially rebuild those Parquet files according to what the changes were in JSON. It's a very clever mechanism using JSON essentially as a transaction log and then quiescing the transaction log on command or on a schedule. So it's pretty neat. It's not exactly groundbreaking as in, oh, wow, nobody has ever come up with this before. If you think about how transaction logs work in relational database systems, it's pretty similar, except that relational database systems tend to be much, much more efficient because you have to be, because you're pushing thousands of transactions through in a second or tens of thousands through in a second on busy systems. And you can't afford to have writing big JSON blobs when much tinier change sets will do, when you're able to spend more time writing out the minimum amount of data so that you can get these transactions moving as fast as possible. So it's not as efficient, but it is pretty easy for a human to read, and it works well enough for data lakes. This pattern that I talked about is the Delta format or Delta Parquet. And if you have a data lake that uses Delta Parquet, we call it Delta Lake. Databricks made that open source, so Delta Lake is an official standard, meaning when Databricks works in Delta Lake, they should support the standard. When Microsoft works in Delta Lake, they should support the standard. When Snowflake does, etc. Now, vendors will do their own weird things on top of Delta Lake, on top of the open source standard, try to get performance improvements or do whatever. That's, again, neither here nor there. We're going to focus specifically on the open source Delta Lake. There is another open source project, and that is Apache Iceberg. Iceberg is a competitor in this space, and that's what this article is all about. So you may, if you're in the warehousing world or in the data analytics world, you might have heard a little bit about Apache Iceberg. And in case not, let's go through this article just a little bit. So the problem statement here is around blob storage. Blob storage has been around. We've used it for data lakes for a while. Blob storage being Azure Blob Storage, Azure Data Lake Gen 2, Amazon S3, Google Cloud Storage, whatever. Well, once you have data in blob storage, you can write it into the data lake. You can read it from the data lake. And appends are pretty good. Reads are fast. But if you want to update data, then we have the problem that I talked about, where either you're writing custom code or you're using some other format to try to manage those changes. Also, if you have an update happening while someone is reading, we know in the relational world that this can cause blocking, especially if you have a pessimistic concurrency. So if I'm trying to update records, you're trying to read those records, what happens? Do I see a snapshot of how the data looked prior to the updates? Do I see the updates as they're happening? Do I have to wait until the update's complete before I'm able to read? Those are all possible valid answers, but they're going to affect the performance and results of your system. And therefore, it's something that you may have to think about and worry about. There is also an issue with data pruning. How do I manage this data? If it's permanent, that may get me in legal trouble. And so there may be records where I legally need to delete them after 7 years or after 8 years or 10 years. There may be other data that I legally must keep for decades, or there's some data that you may have to keep forever. So as a result, we might want to keep some metadata in here that helps us understand how old this data is. And that may help with processing. If I'm only going to pull back data for 7 years, I don't want to retrieve files that are 8 years old. Okay, this gets us into Iceberg itself. And Iceberg is an alternative. It's an open format that is used in data lake houses. In a data lake house, by the way, we talked about a data lake, file storage for analytical purposes. We have data warehouses, which are going to be databases that we can use for analytical queries. The lake house idea is I want to build my warehouse on top of a data lake. I don't want to ETL data from a data lake or from some other source into my warehouse. I want my warehouse just to natively read the data lake in order to get results back. This is something that Databricks started with. Microsoft is trying to do this in Fabric, although the product that they have that is called Fabric Data Warehouse doesn't really do that, but that's for another day. My complaints about Fabric Data Warehouse and its existence are just their story for a different day. Okay, let's quickly go through this article and we'll see how many things did I get wrong along the way in my description. Delta Lake, developed open source by Databricks. You get ACID transactions. So you get, I know she says ACID transactions, and Databricks will tell you that it's ACID compliant. My recollection is that will depend on certain factors. So I guess I should not quibble here. I should say in general, yes, it is accurate because it does build a transaction log in JSON to support ACID transactions. So I will, for the purposes of not getting bogged down too far, agree with that. All right, Iceberg. Netflix came up with Iceberg, and they open sourced it.
DuckDB, look at that.
Yes, DuckDB. Speaking of DuckDB, since Mike,
yeah, you got to do a presentation.
I'm going to talk about DuckDB tomorrow. So if you have never heard of DuckDB and it now intrigues you, you can learn about DuckDB. And I
installed it after you told me about it. I have it at home.
Perfect. You're ahead of the game already. And I may even have a new anecdote about ducks. If you come
I got GooseDB, but I felt like maybe I was being hoodwinked, so I went back and got DuckDB.
I would recommend not getting GooseDB. That's a real jerk of a product.
Yeah, it's a real goose egg.
Okay. I was just going to pause and let people absorb the awfulness of that pun. But now that we have absorbed it,
you have to be thankful for it because it makes your jokes funnier.
That's fair. Or I'll try to undercut you next time. I will attempt to come up with something even worse. Okay. Speaking of even worse, let's talk about feature sets. Let's talk feature comparisons, Iceberg and Delta Lake. So ecosystems. Delta Lake is for Apache Spark, which makes sense because Databricks is the commercial organization behind Apache Spark. They built they built Delta Lake specifically to support their Spark engine. It is open source. You can technically use it with other engines, but Spark is going to be the mainstay there. For Iceberg, it does support Spark. It also supports Hive and Presto if you're still using those. Apache Flink, which is a popular streaming library. Flink and Apache Kafka have sort of merged together at this point. It used to be that Kafka streams would compete with Apache Flink in the streaming space and along with Spark streaming. And then Kafka would have its log-based event system, and Flink didn't really do that very well. So what happened was Confluent basically said, hey, Flink is doing better than Kafka streams. Let's just adopt Flink as our streaming platform. We'll keep Kafka as our event platform and just make both of those products better as a result. So you will often see Kafka and Flink kind of married together at this point instead of being competitors. We do see Snowflake. We do see DuckDB. So we do have some other options in here where there is support. Now, Delta Lake, you can, again, like I said, you can technically use Delta Lake with Snowflake, with DuckDB. It will work, but Iceberg may work a little bit better. As far as changes go, you can make changes to data structures without writing a DDL script. The logs table will basically translate those changes. It saves it as JSON. Iceberg schema changes are metadata operations. So you can add, remove, you can update columns without having to rewrite your table. Similar to SQL Server, I can add a column, I can drop a column, I can rename a column without having to do a full data write. At least any versions in the last 15 years can do that. When it comes to change data, what happens when somebody updates a row? So we can merge, delete, and update. Interestingly, if you're only inserting data into Delta Lake, that does not get logged. That way, you don't have to worry about feeds growing too much. But it is kind of interesting that way. Storage uses Parquet files and contains a list of data changes. Now, Iceberg has a change log procedure, so you can see all of the changes that happen to a table for a specific point in time, all the inserts, updates, and deletes. Both of these are going to be useful if you're building your own change data capture system on top of your data lake. Both of them do at least say that they support ACID compliance. And we have here atomic operations. We have here all four, of ACID. So both of them do claim ACID properties. Multi-table transactions, Delta Lake does not support, but technically Iceberg kind of, sort of, barely supports it. Still, primarily at the table level. This is, again, in contrast to most relational database products where you can easily begin a transaction. You can work off of multiple tables and then either commit or roll back that transaction as a whole. When it comes to updating, with Delta Lake, you change the data, you don't change the original file. You are creating a JSON file or updating the existing JSON file. Let me rephrase that. I had to remember how it works. Every time you make an update, it actually creates a new JSON file. That's how it works. So you update a table, new JSON file. Somebody else updates the table, new JSON file. So we can have a series of JSON files, and this is part of how we can avoid clobbering each other's rights, is we're creating new files that are timestamped, and then those files will allow for a quiescence operation later on. So transaction logs, they get updated to point to new files each time. By contrast, Iceberg does behave a bit differently. So copy on write or merge on read. And That's going to be a little different. I'm not too familiar with exactly the mechanics of how that works, but it is good to call that out because Delta Lake has a specific process, and that process may not work great for a lot of very small write operations. When it comes to partitioning, we have data that we store in directories. So based on the partition columns, the idea here would be if I want to partition by year, month, date, I can have a folder with the years. I can have a set of folders within there for the months and a set of folders within each month for the dates.
Mhm.
For Iceberg, there is a hidden partition scheme, and this dynamically tracks partitions in the metadata without specific directory structures. I am kind of curious about how effectively this process will reduce the amount of data you have to read for operations. One of the big advantages of Delta Lake is if I query and if I pick my partitioning strategy appropriately, let's say almost all of my queries are on date range and I have data going back to 2015. If I query where year is 2024, then it's not going to read any of the data in the folders 2023 or earlier. So I've already cut out 90+% of my data, assuming roughly fixed data sizes per year. With Iceberg, I'm not positive how that works, but the advantage to this is you can have multiple partition schemes for the same data set. Whereas with Delta Lake, you have the folder structure. That is your partitioning scheme. When it comes to partition evolution, you have to manually specify a new partition. Old data will follow the old strategy unless you just rewrite it. So if I switch from year, month, day to year customer ID, then new data, if I specify that new scheme, will follow year customer ID. Old data is still in those year, month, day folders unless I rewrite them into year customer ID. The rewrite operation may be significant, may take a lot of time, it may take a lot of compute power, may even require downtime depending on just how heavily used this warehouse is or this lake house is. Whereas Iceberg, you can easily switch partitions because all of the partitions are metadata only. So you can change those columns at any time and it'll just handle that as changes in metadata. So that seems like a pretty good win for Iceberg. Data deduplication, both of them support it during merge operations. For time travel and rollback, both of them do have time travel capabilities, where time travel says, how did this data look as of April 19th? And that way I can see what kind of changes have happened over the past couple of days and double check to make sure that my data still looks good. File format, Delta Lake is Parquet and JSON, whereas Iceberg supports Parquet, Avro, and Orc. So all three of those file formats that I mentioned just happen to be supported in Iceberg. So that's a nice advantage. As far as data quality goes, Delta will constrain you on not null and on check constraints. And if you have a constraint violation, you will actually get an exception. So you don't have foreign key constraints, you don't have primary key constraints, you don't have unique key constraints, you don't have default constraints as I recall, but you do have not null and check. By contrast, Iceberg has no such constraints. There are no table constraints at all. In this world of analytics, especially in distributed analytics, what we see in modern data warehousing, unfortunately, you're not going to see much in the way of constraints. You're going to see a lot of fix it in your code, which means it probably doesn't get fixed because, let's be honest, if fixing it in your code was a thing that people did, then transactional systems wouldn't look nearly as bad as they do. So basically, it's a fix it in your code type of solution. And the main reason for this is it is really hard to guarantee uniqueness across a variety of servers. I mentioned with the Hadoop distributed file system that you can take a large file, you can break it up, you can store it in chunks across several servers. Well, Each one of those servers could check to see, do I have key 1234? But then in order to see if any of them, if more than one of them has 1234, we now have to bring the file back together, or we have to bring together a hash set of all of the values. And if you're assuming that there's a unique key, essentially every insert operation now requires that you're communicating across all of the hashes, all of the nodes, and then you're doing this major operation. It is not going to work effectively. It's not going to be very efficient at all. And that's why we don't have those sorts of key constraints. It's unfortunate. It is a major advantage that a product like SQL Server or Oracle or Postgres has, is you can set those constraints even on a warehouse, but um, something that we're not going to be able to get in either Delta Lake or Iceberg. Both of these have this notion of vacuum. Vacuum is all about taking your data and cleaning up old data, merging together files, those JSON files, back into new Parquet files. Delta Lake has a default, generally the default is 7 days. If a JSON file is less than 7 days old, it just stays. If it's more than 7 days old, we merge all of those together into the Parquet file, create a new Parquet file off of the change sets. So what this does is it allows us to keep sort of the most recent data in transaction log style. And then as it gets older and we know it's not going to change anymore, now we'll take that time and rebuild those Parquet files, because that can be a little expensive compute wise. So you can manage that automatically. By manage it automatically, I mean set up a script to run the command. So transaction logs will get managed after a certain amount of time. You can set that amount of time yourself. You can set it to 24 hours, to 7 days, to 30 days, whatever number you want. I think there are limits on how high or low you can go, but within reason, you have ability to change that range. Iceberg, this is strictly a manual operation, so you will have to run it yourself or schedule a task to run it. For file sizing, configuration for unified file size, both of them manual maintenance. You're going to have to do it yourself. Converting data in place or migrating data. You can convert data in place using Delta Lake, but Iceberg, you do need to migrate the data. So it's not enough just to drop the files in a directory. You do have to basically perform an ETL operation to load that data into Iceberg. As far as indexing goes, there are some differences for Delta Lake versus Iceberg, but essentially for Iceberg, you don't have indexes as such. You have metadata on the column level and file stats, row counts, min and max values, partition statistics, the types of stuff that you would get with Parquet files. You'll see that as well for Iceberg. Whereas for Delta Lake, you do have this concept of Z ordering, multidimensional clustering. And this is one way that we're able to index data. You can also store this as key value metadata in JSON files. So you can collect indexes to a small extent in Delta Lake. But again, this is not going to be the same thing as working off of a relational database where you've got a lot of capability around rich indexing operations. It's not quite the same. You will still expect to scan files. You will still expect to do a lot of your own dirty work there. And finally, isolation levels. So Delta Lake, you can have serializable writes. The reader will never see inconsistent data. You can have snapshot isolation for reads, where users will not see a change until it completes, and they will not be blocked along the way. They'll just see what the data looked like prior to your operation beginning. The reason that we can do that is all of those JSON files. If I have a new operation, if I have a new insert of my own, my insert operation, the transaction log equivalent, goes into its own new JSON file. If you're reading things, basically we can say this JSON file is not yet ready for reading. Go read everything else. and you're not blocked. You're able to see how things looked prior to that write beginning. Iceberg has snapshot based isolation. So each write has a new snapshot of the table, and we're able to keep track of change sets over time that way. So this is a pretty good article. Also gets into things like performance and security. I think if you are interested in how Apache Iceberg might be useful for you, go check it out, especially if you are not using Spark. So if you're not tied in with Microsoft Fabric, you're not tied in with Databricks, then Iceberg might be useful. This is one of those things where it's more of an architectural decision, and it's probably something that you will have wanted to do or will want to do very early on in a modern data warehousing project, because switching from one to the other is possible, but it is a lot of effort. When it comes to performance, I do want to note Delta Lake is faster, and this is open source Delta Lake. Databricks Delta Lake is even faster. Databricks has some changes that they do not make available in the open source version, so they can sneak their own additional performance gains. We see Delta is faster for data load and querying, and then the table load difference grows as the table gets wider. So your 500 or 1,000 column wide tables, which are causing my eyes to twitch, and that's why I had to close them, they're going to be a lot faster in Delta Lake than they will be in Iceberg. But as Maria points out, that benchmark is a couple of years old, so maybe things have changed a little bit. I don't have any recollection of it changing, so I would still expect Iceberg to be a bit slower. It is easier to manage, easier to operate on, potentially faster if you have a series of operations that are off of your partition key, meaning if you partitioned by year, then month, then day. If you have a series of queries that don't use year, month, day partitioning, perhaps Iceberg could be faster in those types of queries. But in general, as far as this kind of tells me that as far as file read operations go, Iceberg may not be as good about ignoring swaths of files. There's a note here that Iceberg can be as secure as Delta Lake, but that you'll have to follow on with some other product like Apache Hive's role-based access controls or Glue and its capabilities. And so as your summary, basically both of them are going to be quite viable alternatives to each other. If you are in the Microsoft Fabric space, you're using Delta Lake. If you are on Databricks, you're using Delta Lake. If you're building something on premises, both options are available to you. If you're in Snowflake, both options are available to you. That's the point of the story, I guess, the moral of things. And fortunately, that moral of things takes us right just about to the top of the hour. So how did that go, Mike? Did you pick
That
up
was really good, and I was actually looking up some of the companies that use it because I was thinking about some of these massive data sets, and I was just suspicious that if Netflix was kind of part of the development, I looked it up and it looks like Apple uses it, Airbnb, some of these companies that have absolutely massive data sets that require the level of distribution that you're talking through.
Yeah, for sure. So they do have some big corporate sponsors, and obviously Delta Lake does as well. So both of them have a lot of support. There are some good number of big companies using both. They're both under active development, so I don't think there's a solid reason to say no to either one of those in terms of it's going to be a dead product in 2 years. But you are probably going to get locked into one or the other depending on what platform you're using. All right.
Yeah, it looks like it came out,
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Mike.
like 7 years ago. Now it's like a top line project, so
Yes,
it looks like it's going to have a lot of staying power. Cool.
I agree.
Anyway, thanks.
Of course. And so we are wrapping up for the night. Hopefully you enjoyed tonight's episode of Shop Talk. Remember, tomorrow, as Mike alluded to, I am going to talk about DuckDB, a getting started with DuckDB for our business intelligence, data science, artificial intelligence, and whatever else we can throw into it, fourth Tuesday of the month. You can sign up for that for free. No chickens exchange necessary. Meetup.com/trypass. And you just show up here tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel, 6 p.m. Eastern time, 3 p.m. Pacific time, whatever time it is where you're at 1 hour ago. Show up, learn about DuckDB, enjoy the ride. And until we see each other in a future episode of Shop Talk, in a user group meeting, or I guess down at the market trying to exchange chickens for tickets, take care.
Night.